Good news today for former President Trump, the GOP's presumptive nominee for president, seeing the bond amount that he has to pay in his New York civil fraud case drastically reduced. A New York appeals court has given Donald Trump 10 more days to post his bond to satisfy the civil fraud judgment. It's also cut the bond down to $175 million. Trump announced last Friday that he had nearly $500 million in cash that he could use to pay that $454 million bond. For now, chances for New York Attorney General Letitia James to seize the former president's assets is looking less likely, at least at the moment. Trump responded on Truth Social saying this shows, quote, how ridiculous and outrageous the judge's original decision was. He also asserted that he had done nothing wrong. A frustrated New York judge today refusing to dismiss the hush money case against former President Trump. Thousands of documents not handed over to Trump's team by the prosecution. The judge giving the prosecution a pass. Our legal correspondent Arlene Richards brings us more.
Judge Juan Merchan appeared very skeptical Monday during a special hearing held in the New York hush money case. The judge saying he agreed to schedule the hearing because of the very serious allegations put forth by former President Trump's defense team. But after reviewing the numerous exhibits from both sides, the judge was not convinced that the prosecution had attempted to obstruct justice, which is essentially the allegation laid out by the Trump team in a lengthy motion to dismiss. At one point, Judge Merchan accused the defense of repeatedly misinterpreting the law. The defense motion centers around allegations that the prosecution withheld thousands of documents related to federal interviews of the prosecution's key witness, Michael Cohen. He was Trump's former personal attorney who served time for lying to Congress. Trump's team had argued that those interviews contained crucial information relevant to the defense of this case, and they maintained that it was up to the prosecution to obtain those documents from the U.S. attorney and turn them over. But the judge strongly disagreed and pointed out efforts made by the prosecution to obtain those records, saying that the defense also had a duty to make efforts to get them as early as last May. At different times during their proceeding, Judge Merchan scolded the defense for what he said was their own lack of due diligence and failure to apply the proper law. Needless to say, Judge Merchan was not inclined to grant this motion. Ruling from the bench, the judge said that the prosecution was not at fault for federal documents being provided late. He said the defense was not harmed by the late production and that they have been given enough time to prepare for trial. The trial will begin April 15th. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And in former President Trump's civil case, an 11th hour partial stay from the New York Supreme Court cuts his bond to $175 million and gives him more time to pay it. Meanwhile, in the hush money case, the trial court judge denying Trump's motion to delay his criminal trial in New York. Joining us now to break it all down is attorney Mitchell Epner, who has handled complex commercial litigation and white-collar criminal cases. Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
Of course. As you know, the New York Supreme Court threw a bit of a lifeline to former President Donald Trump by cutting his $465 million bond to $175 million and giving him a 10-day extension. Trump saying he greatly respected the court and said he would pay the bond very quickly and that they'd win the case. How does the appellate court stay of portions of Judge Arthur Engoron's judgment look for the judge, and does this potentially signal the court's inclination to overturn the judge's ruling in the appeal?
So those are great questions, and I don't think that this signals any intention one way or the other with regard to the merits of the case. Former President Trump had indicated that he could not raise the funds in order to put up the full $550 million bond that was required to secure the $462 million judgment. He had offered to put up $100 million. The appellate division didn't give him everything that he asked for, but instead said if he posted within the next 10 days $175 million, that would stop New York Attorney General Letitia James from executing on the judgment during the pendency of the appeal. So now we'll see whether or not Trump can actually come forward with that $175 million bond.
Trump also spoke to reporters today outside of his Wall Street building, saying the cases against him are, quote, election interference. He questioned the legality of Judge Engoron's assessment of his property and his judgment. Trump also saying, referring to the judgment, quote, those weren't the numbers Engoron was discussing during settlement negotiations. Do you think Judge Engoron's $464 million judgment was punitive for Trump's fighting the case and much of the ire directed at the judge throughout the trial?
I've seen absolutely nothing that indicates it was punitive. I've read the decision many times, and it appears very solid on both the law and the facts. Former President Trump will frequently say things that have no basis in either the law or the facts. It simply seems to fit what he wants people to hear at any particular time.
Now, in the New York hush money case, Judge Juan Merchan setting the trial to start on April 15th, denying Trump's motion for a delay. Trump saying today in his news conference that these cases wouldn't be happening if he weren't running for office and that no crime was committed. Break down for us, if you will, the merits of the prosecution's case involving alleged hush money. How does this ultimately constitute a crime, if any?
So that's a really great question. There are 34 charges, but they all stem from the same course of events. Donald Trump had Michael Cohen, his lawyer, pay Stormy Daniels $130,000 so that she would keep quiet about the sexual encounter they had back in 2006. Instead of paying him back out of his own pocket, Donald Trump had, according to the indictment, Michael Cohen submit a series of bills as if it was for legal services on 17 separate occasions, which led to the 34 charges for false documents. And that would have been a misdemeanor. But when the false documents are designed to cover up some other crime, that turns it from a misdemeanor into a felony. So Donald Trump is facing 34 e-felonies in New York. An e-felony is the lowest level of felony. So these are very serious charges, but they're unlikely, even if he were convicted, to lead to incarceration.
So we had heard a moment ago our legal correspondent Arlene Richards sort of breaking down today's events and giving us an overview. Part of the reason that we're seeing this delay is that the documents were withheld by the prosecution. Is this a typical?
That's not what the judge said. The documents weren't withheld by the prosecution. The documents were late in being produced by the federal prosecutors from the Southern District of New York. And what the judge held very adamantly today was that was not the fault of the New York prosecutors who are trying this case. And he, in fact, ascribed most of the blame for the delay to Donald Trump's legal team and their failure to take timely action.
Now, Trump's attorney, Todd Blanche, said that it was unfair to Trump and the American people to start this trial in April or any point before the election, and that they'd have tremendous amount of information to help defend the former president. Do you think that this information will ultimately be exculpatory? Do we see any evidence of that? And what kind of information do you think the attorneys have?
So to the contrary, the prosecutors made a representation that out of the roughly 100,000 pages of additional documents, maybe 300 pages were new and relevant, and the vast majority of them were inculpatory, meaning more likely to make Trump seem guilty than not guilty. So I think that the Southern District of New York federal prosecutors did nobody any favors when they handed over these documents late. But according to Justice Merchan, there is zero reason to believe that any of these documents were withheld on purpose or would be helpful to Donald Trump.
Attorney Mitchell Epner, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.